Hello everyone. The other day I was scrolling through Twitter when I saw this tweet from Jose about a autocomplete gem. I guess this is something he's been working on for a bit. It seems like it's a YouTube style autocomplete that's going to be using like turbo and stimulus. So I thought we would take a look at this and then maybe play around with it. The repository is currently in a very early alpha. This just went live a couple days ago. He's still taking requests. They're discussing future roadmaps for the gem. So a lot of what we're going to do here is probably going to change. He does have a docs site that we'll be taking a look through where it has various types of autocomplete in it. So here we can see a couple different movies, and we can search for, I don't know, Aladdin. You can get something like Aladdin. So this works similar to what you would see on a website like YouTube, right? And there's some snippets here where you're pretty much just using a combo box from a form to create the search. And then you have your turbo response, which is what's updating the page afterwards. And there's some other examples here with just a basic combo box and then sort of building on that for async stuff. So we're going to take a look at the YouTube example and I'll show you how to set this up. For the styling, it does mention using Tailwind, so we're going to be using Tailwind in our project. And then we're going to take it a step further because if it's going to be like a YouTube-style autocomplete, I thought, why not use this for an actual search? So we'll be doing some filtering with this as well, which is going to require us to modify the gem itself. So maybe that's something you're into, then I can show you how that'll work. If you're interested in the actual end product, this is sort of what it'll look like. You basically have a page with some posts where you can show, edit, whatever, your basic CRUD app. And then you click here and you can search for stuff. We'll search for this many summers. So I'll just search for I don't know, many, or wait, what was it? Summer. Probably help if I spelled it correctly. And you can see that filters things just like that. We can of course backspace this. It resets everything. And then we can search for I don't know, swan. It'll also give us the swan. We can click on this if we want to. Of course, that's not going to autocomplete because we don't have the full thing here. But if we do after many swans, we can then see that we can autocomplete the entire thing when we click on it. So the behavior here is a little bit different because this is my modified version, but I'll show you how to set all of this up. So to get started, we're going to go ahead, we're going to come into our terminal and we're going to create a new Rails app. So say Rails new video, and I'm going to give this a -C of Tailwind because I want to use Tailwind for this. We're not going to use ESBuild because I don't think ESBuild is working yet. So we are going to be using import maps for this one. All right, and there we go. So now let's go ahead and let's open this up in VS Code. So I'll cd into video and I'll run a code dot to open this up in VS Code. Okay, so the reason why we start with the Tailwind stuff is because a lot of the styling relies on Tailwind. That said, there is some YouTube specific styling that's at work here, which we're gonna grab real quick. So if we come here to the Hotwire Combobox repository, we can go into the docs repo. And then in the docs repo, which is the repository for this documentation site, we can actually come into the app, the assets, the style sheets, and I believe it's in the application.tailwind.css. You can see here, there's some YouTube components, which we can just go ahead and copy. We can then grab these, come into our app, our assets, our style sheets, and our tailwind.css, or .css, and we can just paste these in. This just gives us a little bit of stuff like the magnifying glass, and it does some adjustments for us. I'm not a front-end web designer, so I just kind of nod my head and pretend to know what I'm talking about. Let's go ahead and let's add the Hotwire Combobox Gem now to our bundle. So we're just going to go ahead and we're going to run a bundle add for the Hotwire Combobox, and I'm also going to add faker because I want to create some fake data. Go ahead and run that, and then we can minimize it. After we do that, we can then go ahead and generate a scaffold for us. I'm actually going to close this side panel for a bit because it's taking up too much real estate. I'm going to do a scaffold for a post, and we'll just do a post that has a title and a body of type text, something like that. Next, we're going to come into our DB and our seeds. So we come over here to the DB folder, seeds.rb. We're going to create 100 posts using faker. This is just going to give us some sample data so that it's not super boring to look at. And then after we're done with that, we can then go ahead and run a Rails db::migrate to migrate our database. And then we can do a db::seed to seed our database. That'll take a second to run. Once that's done though, we should have the data. Let's go ahead and let's run a bin/dev now to start our server and then come over to localhost port 3000/posts. But I don't have Foreman installed because of how I have things set up. So let me do a gem install Foreman so this stops yelling at me. And then I'll do a bin/dev to start the server for realsies this time. So So go ahead and start up. I can then go over to localhost port 3000/posts. And now we can see we have a similar look to what we just had minus the search bar. So let's go ahead and let's set up the search bar first. Let's come over here to our views, our posts, and our index.html.erb. Inside of this index file, we want to create our combo box. Now this is a little different than your general scaffold that you get out of the box without Tailwind. And that's mostly just because the Tailwind stuff requires some additional styling. So that's why things look a little different over here. But we're going to go below the new post and we're just going to paste in the thing to render a combo box. So this is just going to be a partial we create in our post. So inside of our post folder, new file, _ combobox.html.erb, just to keep things a bit more separated. Then for this, what we want to do is basically set up the YouTube one that he has here, which was this YouTube style autocomplete. To get this, we can actually come over to the documentation repo again, come into app, go down to views, go down to combo boxes, and then look at the YouTube example. And then in the YouTube example, we can see that he just has this div with an ID of YouTube right here. We can go ahead and paste this in, and I'll full screen this so we can take a better look at this. So we do need to change this a bit because instead of going to the search URL, I'm just going to go to the post path because I don't feel like setting everything up for that. There's a couple other things we can do here to set up the autocomplete the way I had it, but we're going to leave that alone for now. We can leave the name when new as search. We can, if we want to, give this something like an ID. Set the ID to be like the post container. You'll see why we're doing that in a minute. And the mobile app can stay at 0 pixels. At this point, this is pretty much it for our combo box here. Let's come over to our app and just refresh the page real quick. When we go to refresh the page, you can see we're running into a searchables path issue here because we have our post path, but then we're setting this search path to hit the searchables path. We want to change this one to also be the post path. You can even change this to be like the post URL if you want to. We'll go ahead and we'll refresh, and now we have our search bar. When we click on the search bar, you can see we're running into an issue immediately, which is telling us that there's an unknown format for the turbo streams. To fix this, we can come over to our views, our post, right-click new file, and just call this index.turbo_stream.erb, I think, is how those are usually named. Let me just check my notes. Then we can come over here and go back to posts. And now if we click on this, we won't get that error anymore. But of course, if I search for one of these titles like Jacob, nothing's happening. So let's go ahead and let's deal with the backend first. So we now have this presumably hitting our backend because when I type something here like Jacob, you can see my terminal is like, just doing a bunch of stuff. Right here, it's passing back a parameter named Q, which has Jacob inside of it. The Q stands for query. So let's go back to our app controllers and our post controller. Inside of our post controller, we are now getting a parameter Q that we want to search by. To do this, we can just say, instead of doing post equals posts.all, we can do @posts equals, and we'll just do post.search, where we do a search for the params with the Q. We can go ahead and save this, come over here, refresh the page, and let's type in Jacob. If we type in Jacob, we can scroll down here and we'll see no method error, undefined method search for our post class. So what we want to do now is come into our models and our post.rb, and shocker, there's no post search thing in here. So to do this, we want to create a scope, which is going to be for search. We can then do a comma, and this is already auto completing. So here it's a little bit different than what I have in my notes, but we're effectively just passing in the query, and then we're searching for a title that is like the query. Now, depending on how you want this to work, you can either put the percents at the beginning and the end, and what this means is it just matches anything. So if you have like a percent query, for example, this will give you something like if you are searching, I don't know, like test, it will return all posts with test in the title, but it has to end with test because the percent is at the beginning. Conversely, if you do something like, what do we have here? It would be query percent. This means you can have anything after the query, right? But the beginning will have to start with test, right? And then if you have like query with percents inside of each side, searching test will turn all posts that have test in the title. It can be anywhere in the title. So it's pretty lazy way of doing this, but it's a very easy way to set something up really quick where you don't have to think too hard about it. So that gives us our scope for our search. So let's go ahead and let's save this, and then we'll take a look at what this is doing for us. So I'm going to come over here, I'm going to refresh again, and we're just going to search for something like Jacob. So now if I hit enter, we'll see that, Jacob causes this to fire off, but nothing else is really happening here. Why is that? Well, in our index.turbostream.erb, we're not doing anything yet. So inside of this file, what we want to do is, if we come back over to the documentation website, wherever that is, we want to search for the async right here, the async combo box right here. And in here, it'll tell you, you have your basic combo box tag, which we of course have because we set up the partial right here. Then we have our controller, which does our search, just like we set it up. And then we have the async combo box options happening in our index.turbostream. So let's come into our index.turbostream.erb and let's set this up for something like this. Now, because we're doing the async, we want this to have a for ID, which is this post container, which is why we gave this combo box form a post container in it. So that'll allow us to do this async. If we now come in here and click on this, we'll get another error, which is undefined method to combo box display, which means we once again have to come into our post model. So if we come up here to wherever it is, let me just, right there. Inside of our post.rb model, we need to add a to combo box display, which is effectively just a quick little method that has title being returned, which is just going to return the title whenever that's called. So now if we come over here and go to localhost port 3000/posts again, we can now see that we get something here. It looks a little bit strange, but if we search for like Jacob, you'll see that it's returning those two instances that have Jacob in it. I'm assuming there's two, but you'll notice that the rest of the CSS doesn't really match things. For that, we want to include the actual CSS for this, which we can do by coming into app, views, layouts, application.html.erb. And inside of the application.html.erb file, we have this tailwind, then we have our application right here. And we just want to add this little snippet, which is the combo box tag for the style sheets. Go ahead and save this. And you can, of course, customize this however you want. If you want to, you can make it look like everything else, add in an application, data, turbo track, whatever. It's really ultimately up to you, but I'll just save this to show you that this works just fine. Now, if we come over here and refresh one more time, you'll see that we get the drop down with the little scroll bar right here and everything being filtered. So if I search for Jacob, you can see Jacob shows up. However, if I'm clicking on something, you'll notice that nothing's being filtered. Even if I come in here and I just type Jacob, it's not filtering the results. Why is that? Well, we've covered turbo a lot on this channel, so hopefully you're aware, but whenever you do something like this, just having this index file doesn't cause it to do this filtering. What we need it to do is we need it to say, okay, you're typing this in to the server. Now, when I get the data back, like the new set of posts, after I've done this searching, I'm returning at post to you, you need to do something. So in that case, we're just going to say, all right, let's go ahead and let's do something. Turbo stream.update posts. We'll give it a partial because we always have to provide it with a new partial. And in this case, it'll be the post/post partial. And then we can just give it a collection, which will be at posts, something like that. So here's what the full index.turbostream looks like now. Now let's come over here and let's refresh. We'll go ahead and we'll type Jacob, and you'll see that it is now filtering the two posts that have Jacob in them. So that's pretty cool. If you want to, you can also come into like your post right here and maybe add one more block just to make it a bit more clear that things are being filtered. Give this one an ID, and then give this the post.id if you want to. So we'll come over here and we'll refresh. You can see it's giving us the two posts that have Jacob have I loved as the title, which are 1 and 75. Okay, cool. Now, what I want to do is I want this to be a case where if I type Jacob, or if I refresh and then I type Jacob, have I loved, and I click on this after I've just typed Jacob, I want this to then filter based on what I've clicked. Now, this might not seem evident at first, but let's say we have a bunch of things that start with T, right? So in this case, I want to search for the way of all flesh. I click on that. It changes this search bar, but it doesn't change our search results. So then if I press like space, this should hopefully give us the singular post that has that title. So you can see clicking on it has the illusion of working, but it's not fully working yet. I'm assuming this is something that will be fixed, or maybe I'm thinking of the implementation differently. It doesn't matter. So we're going to go ahead and we're going to take a look at how I would personally go through and ruin a very good gem by adding my own terrible code to it. So we come over to the repository for the code, not for the documentation, but just for the code itself. And then we click on fork. Now I already have a forked repository, so we're going to pretend that I've now done that. We can then go over to github.com/myrepository, and I should see the forked one right here. And then after you fork the repository, you can then go ahead and clone it. So in my case, I'm going to pretend that I've done that. And we're going to go ahead and we'll do like Alt-Shift+ to open up a side panel. And then we'll just cd into this directory real quick in our other side panel. I'll cd out of here, and oops, in here I should have this Hotwire Combobox video repository, which is basically the same thing as this forked repo. So there's been no changes to the gem. This is just the gem downloaded and cloned to my machine, right? Now, if I come in here, I should have a couple of branches, I think. Let me do git fetch, and I think it's git checkout -b video. I don't know if I made this yet. There we go. So I now have this branch list. Cool. Okay, so let's go ahead and let's open this in VS Code. So the reason why I'm doing this is because I come over here, I saw in the issues that there was a discussion happening about overriding attributes on the hidden field. And they were trying to submit the form whenever the combo box changes. And I saw that Jose said something about firing off an event when this happens. And I was like, you know, some of those words make sense to me. Let me go figure out how this works. So I threw it into ChatGPT because I didn't feel like thinking. I wanted to take all the credit though. And it said, you're probably going to be looking for some kind of JavaScript, right? Which makes sense. Could have thought of that myself if I had taken 5 seconds. So if we come in here, we come into the app, the assets, the JavaScripts. You can see there's a bunch of different JS here, but what we want to look at is we have the controllers, which is going to have some interesting info in it. And the more you look through this, the more you sort of understand the logic and the flow behind it, and you start to realize that actually there's not a lot here that is like super scary to look at. It's very clean code, which makes your job a lot easier. And eventually you go through here and you look for something that seems to make sense, and you come across, I don't know, let's say the filtering, right? In the filtering JS, if I can open up my notes here, you'll see that at the top, we have the filter that happens with the debounced filter async, and we've gone through some of this stuff before. Then maybe you're like, okay, so this is what's doing stuff whenever something is typed. Maybe it's doing the actual filtering. In this case, it's more of like a selection option because I'm like selecting things. And then in the selection option, we can then say, all right, so we have the select option happening here. We have this .select current event target. And I'm just going to add in a couple of comments here. So we have like the direct user action via click, which is this select event target. We then have the closing right here, which is like close the list box after the selection. And then we can add something in the middle that says if the user did an action before we close the select box, let's go ahead and let's fire a change event. Something like this. Go ahead and fire that change event. We'll save that. You can then go ahead and push this up to your own repository. So we'd say something like, I don't know, git status, git add dot, git commit -m, video commit, I don't know, number 1, because there's going to be a couple of these. We can do a git push, and then it'll tell us where we want to push this to. So we'll push this up to there. We'll go ahead and push this. We can come over to my own repository here, and we can see video how to push. And at this point, we can use the video branch in our own repository as opposed to how we were doing it previously. So let's come into our gem file, scroll down here to the gem file, open this up. And in here, what we want to do is we want to, let me open this up. We're going to come down to the bottom where we have the Hotwire combo box right here. And instead of just doing this version, what we can do is we can say, all right, we have the Hotwire combo box. You can leave the version if you want to. In my case, I'm going to override it. But we want to pull this from, in my case, Deanin, because that's my username, / whatever I named the repository. And then instead of pulling from the main branch, I think I called it video this time, we'll pull from the video branch. We can come over here, we can do a bundle update real quick. And you should see that this is fetching from the GitHub repo you specified. And you'll see some things get updated, bundle updated, cool. Let's go ahead and let's do a bin/dev. And let's start our server. Now, just full disclosure, this isn't going to work right out of the box. Let's come in here and let's just type, I don't know, we were looking for like the, right? We click on this, and it's still not doing anything. If we hit Control-Shift-I, see here, this .fire change event is not a function. But that means that the fire change event that we put in there is now working. So we can just keep going with what we were doing, because now we have our logic happening whenever we click on this, right? Like if I clear this, I click on this, you can see that fires that change event. So that's the spot where we want it. Then we just have to implement the fire change event function, and we should be good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and open up my notes again and look for the fire change event function. And then we're just going to put this wherever we want to. In my case, I'll put this below like a commit selection, right? So we have fire change event. I tried to stick to the naming convention just to, make things flow a bit better. I create a item selected event after I pass in the option, because, option seems like the event.current target. Options used in other places. We're following that convention, just trying to make sense of what we're doing. So we say, all right, selected event is a new custom event. Selected item is the option. The selected here, I think this is a Boolean, so we don't really need that. Bubbles, true. Cancelable, true. You can see here what these do. And then we dispatch an event called item selected event, which is the name of our variable right here. So that event is combo box item selected. So we can now go ahead and save this. We can push this up over here, get status. We can do a get status. We should see that one change, get add dot, get commit -m, video commit number 2. We can go ahead and we can push that up as well. We can come over here, stop the server, do a bundle update, pull that gem version, and then we'll go from here. So let's go ahead and let's do a bin slash dev, and let's refresh this page. So now if we come over here and we look for and we click on this, you'll see that that is kind of doing something at least. If I refresh and I search for this and I click on like the way through the woods, you'll see that's still not quite doing what we want it to. So let's go ahead and let's generate a stimulus controller. Stimulus, and we'll call this, I think I called it combo box. Go ahead and start this. And again, this is pretty much just me messing around with the repository a bit. So you want to take what I'm saying here with like a grain of salt. This isn't like the definitive solution for what you're looking for, but this is sort of how you would go through and try to modify these things. So let's come into our JavaScript, our controllers, and our combo box controller. So in our combo box controller, the first thing we want to do is listen for that event. So inside of our connected, I'm just going to say this.element, add event listener, combo box item selected, because that's what we called it. And then we can say this.handle item selected. What is handle item selected? Well, that's another method that we want to make here in a second. But because we set this up in the connect, I want to make sure that there's a disconnect that also removes this listener when it needs to. Then we can come down here and do the handle item selected event. Handle item selected takes in an event. First thing it does is it gets the post container by ID. I did this because I didn't feel like thinking how to set up the stimulus. Because of how this is set up, it's a bit weird where you need to attach the ID. But in this case, we're gonna grab the post container. We're gonna optionally modify the input value if you want to. In some cases, when you like click on one of these, it would then do something like, I don't know, let's say the mermaid's singing, right? So we have the mermaids singing. If you were to click on this, it would add the mermaid singing and then also add a space. In that case, you could just add a space in here and it would do that for you before it handles everything else. So it changes the input, fires off a new input value, and dispatches that input event. And then now that we have that, we can then come over to our, what is it? The index partial, or the partial for the combo box right here. So inside of this combo box partial, we need to do a couple things. The first thing we're going to do is I'm going to throw this inside of a turbo frame tag called combo box. Then we have our YouTube with a form width that needs to change a little bit. We're going to go ahead and we're going to add in a data here. So after the post path, I go ahead and add in some data with a controller that is our combo box controller and a combo box target of form. Again, this is optional. You could still just use like this.element, but I'm going to say targets is equal to, and we'll just put in the form. After we have the form here, we're then pretty much good to go. So I'm going to go ahead and save this. We now have our controller connecting. If I start our server here, we have our controller connecting. We'll go ahead and we'll refresh. Now, if I come over here and I click on the search box, I type in and I'm going to backspace Way of the Flesh. And instead I'm going to click on mermaid singing. You'll see that mermaid singing is then set, the title is updated, and we're good to go. Now there's one other thing that I want to fix here, which is if I backspace this works just fine. I can backspace all the way here to and you'll see everything update. But let's say I'm looking at the mermaid singing and I control backspace. You'll see I'm stuck in a loop. And this one was kind of annoying to figure out, but I think I figured out what's firing that. If we come over here to our gem one final time, we want to come over to, I believe, the filtering section. If we come into App, Assets, JavaScript, Models, Combobox, Filtering, inside of filtering at the bottom here, there's this really weird is deleting event.input type delete content backward. And I was looking at this and I was like, this doesn't seem totally right to me. What could possibly be happening here? Because I'm deleting content backwards. And then I realized I'm not deleting content backwards when I hit Control and backspace. I'm deleting a word backwards, which is somehow different. So if we come over here and we look for, what is it? Delete content backwards versus delete word backwards. We find a MDN Mozilla page. And if we come in here, it has an example where if you click on here and you like backspace or something, it tells you what you did. So that backspace there is a delete content backwards, but Control backspace is a delete word backwards. I realize I sound questionable in terms of my sanity right now, but if we change this to have an or event.input type delete content, and we're going to change this to delete, let me close this, to delete word backward, we can then go ahead and save this. We can do a git status, git add dot, git commit -m, fix content, or fix control plus backspace, git push, and then come over here, do a a bundle update. And then we can go ahead and do a bin/dev. We can come over to our repo again. We'll refresh the page. And then if we come in here and we search for like the mermaid singing, right? We can now hopefully hit Control and backspace and it works just fine. Again, this could just be me overcomplicating things, but I think this is what was causing the Control backspace to work in a weird way. Now, I don't know if this is the intended way to use this gem. If it's not, you could have stopped at like 5 minutes into the video, but I thought this was a fun little, rabbit hole to go down. So hopefully you got something out of this. Maybe you saw something you enjoyed here. I would recommend checking out the gem, maybe, having a discussion, leaving some like suggestions or whatever. But even if you don't, it's still a really good tool just for creating like a quick little combo box if you need one. Maybe your use case is different than mine. But that's going to do it for me. Thank you so much for watching, and hopefully I will see you in the next one.